Hello everyone, this is Ibrahim and we're still doing Learn Flutter videos. So, in the last video we've seen how to add, we've added a page view and within the page view we had the indicators change with the page view. It was pretty nasty and it wasn't really pretty at all. It was really terrible. So in the last video we've moved the indicators outside, so we had a common function that generates the circles for us, these dots, and another function that calls that has a condition that creates either a light circle or a dark circle. But this doesn't really change unless we change it manually. So now we need to, because we need to make changes to the screen, we have to use the stateful widget. Notice that we're using the stateless widgets. We've been using the stateless widget. Let me collapse all of what is inside of the stateless widget. So inside of the stateless widget, we had one build method that renders all of the elements or the widgets within the stateless widget. And again, stateless widgets means that we can't change the elements within the screen after they're rendered. So in order for us to create this interactivity or make changes to the current screen based on certain action, we need to flip to stateful widgets. So now what we need to do for our onboarding screen is that the moment this page changes, we want to get that page's number or the index and pass it to the creator, to this indicator function creator, which is this indicator setup. We pass the index to them. So based on the change we make to the page view, so if you're in second page view, the index 1 would be passed to the indicator setup, and this would change accordingly. So because there's a change to the screen, we need to change to the stateless widgets. Let me create a new file just to show you how the stateful widgets are made. So before we start anything, so let me create an empty class and make the necessary imports, package Flutter material. And now the very most important part in stateful widgets that you should always remember and memorize is that stateful widgets, unlike stateless widgets, you see, these stateless widgets implement one single build method. In the stateful widgets, we implement two classes: the stateful class and the stateful widget class and the state class. So we implement two classes: stateful widget class and the state class. So we need to extend these two classes in order for us to use the stateful widgets. Okay, and it's very simple. So the first method, which is the class's name, that calls up the state. So the stateful widget calls up the state and the implementation of the state class. So the stateful abstract, let me call this abstract, which is the class's implementation, calls the state's abstracts. Now, in theory, this might sound complicated, but in implementation, it's very straightforward. Okay, so let me add in this is sample. Let's call this sample stateless widget, and let me call the other one, I'll write it down. So class sample2. This should extend stateful widgets, and it should have been, and the implementation comes in here. And again, we said two classes, right? So this is the other class, which should implement the class. Let's call it sample2 state. This should implement the state class, yeah. So this would extends states. Now state takes in our parent class, which is sample2. Okay, and this is the implementation of the function. Now within the state we need, so states basically need, so all the widgets that we need will be put within the build method that's inside of the state instead of the stateful widget. Notice in the stateless widget we didn't need a state, so all the elements were inside of the build that's inside of the stateless. In this case the build is inside of the state, so similar to what we've done. So we override, God, what's wrong with my spelling, capabilities. So override, and then we create the build method, the widget. Oh, it's not what we need to do. So widget build, and then build context, and then the implementation of the function. So we just return, say, a container here, container. And for the stateful widget, we just have to do an override to the implementation where we point to the state class that we've just created. So override, and oh my god, what's wrong? Okay, so the name of the class that we've created is called sample2 state. This, we create a state like so, and this is a single arrow function. We don't have to create the curly brackets for the body. We can do that if we please, but there's no need to, because it's a single line. So anyway, so we call in, so we create the state, and then we just set it to point to the states class, which is underscore sample2 state, semicolon. And that's about it. That's the difference between stateless and stateful widgets. So in the implementation, in the stateless widgets, we just had one build method that's inside of the stateless widget, and everything that needs to be presented to the screen is inside of the build method. However, in the stateful widget, we remember we need to implement two classes, the stateful widget class and the state class. So the stateful widget class points to the state class. So we create the state class, which is this one right here, and we implement the build method and the content, and all the widgets that goes inside that are presented to the screen goes inside the build method that's inside the state implementation of the state. Now the state's parent basically points back to the sample2, which is the stateful widget implementation. And the stateful widget implementation is basically, you can think of this as the wrapper to this class here. So kind of this, because this is pointing, so you're saying basically create an instance of sample2 state class here, and which is this class here. So we're kind of creating an instance of the sample2 state, which is this one. That's inside of this one and inside of the stateful widget. I hope that makes sense. If you try to graph it, you can think of this writing here. So stateful widget implements, points to, is the parent, and then followed by the state. And the state has all the goodies, which is the widgets. Okay, so let's keep this test here and try to change, go back to our boarding, because we want to change these indicators to be stateful. We want them to change based on the change then in the page view. So let's go ahead and make the change. Thankfully, in Flutter and VS Code, you can change this very easily. Now in this case, if we need to change this, we just need to change this class to an extension. Instead of it extending stateless widget, we need to extend state, and then we need to create a stateful widget implementation, just like we've done here in sample2. And so we can go we can go boarding and then boarding state. You can call this boarding state. So this one would be extending the boarding parents, and the boarding state would be just like that. Would be pointing to the boarding state. So the implementation of the boarding state. So that's it. So similarly, and then we just copy and paste all of this content that we have here into the state, into this class. So this, if we try to reformat this, okay, so everything that was inside of the stateless would come in here, inside of the state. And this would always remain a single line, just like we're looking at it here. Now let's do the automated way. Instead of us doing all of this manually, we could, luckily again, Flutter and VS Code, we could just click on the bulb here and then convert to stateful widget. Look at this magic. See? If we try to compare the two, if we try to compare the two, behind this, okay, so there we are. So this is our implementation. So this is the boarding state, which points to the boarding state class that implements the state widget. So, and everything that's inside, everything that was inside of the stateless is now inside of the state implementation of the stateful widget. Okay, all right, so that was clear. Let me close all of this and get back to our original view and then save. Now nothing is going to change because, okay, let me reload this first. Okay, so nothing, yeah, because the moment you change from stateful to stateless, you need to reload your application. You don't want to run the cached version of the original implementation. Anyway, but so nothing is going to change because all we've done now is that we made the change from stateless to stateful, but we did not inform the application to make any changes. Like, which part is it going to change? Is the image going to change? If this is going to change? What is going to change? Okay, so that's where we use the method exposed to us by the state class, which is the set state. Let's see how that works. Okay, so we know that the page view widget is inside of the build, which is right here. Now the page view not only takes children, but also has on page changed method. So you could go, I think it's on page change. Yeah, it's on page changed, and then what you want to do. This takes in a function like that. So, and passes in an integer. Let's call this index, or page, you can name it whatever. So we want, so as the page changes, the index of the page is passed through here. So we now have the page index. What we want to do, let's create a global variable, not a global value, more like a variable called integer page index, which equals 0. So as we start off with the page, which is the first page, index 0. And at the moment the user changes the page, we want to update the index and accordingly update this. So now on change method here, this is where the beauty of the stateful widgets come in handy. It's very simple. We just need to use the set state method like so. So set states, and inside of it, it implements the method. So all we have to do is page index that we just defined would equal the index passed in, which is this index passed through. And that's about it. And now, instead of us manually passing the number here, we just need to pass the page index. And this gets re-rendered. Let's see how that looks like. See, now let's change the second page. This is the third page. Remember, we're passing the 0 index, and this is originally has been. So this is the first image. This is the circle. Let's change to the second image, and there we have it. Third image, there we have it. That's the beauty of the stateful widget. And basically that's about it. The video is reaching a 15-minute limit, so I think we're good to stop here. So the next video would be basically, I think we could wrap this one up on the last video, or maybe 2 more videos. So the next step would be to command this next button to move to the second image. So the moment you load your phone, you can either scroll like so, or you could click on the next button and it would automatically take you to the second page. We could do that on the next. Since we have a stateful widgets, we can do a simple change and that will update accordingly. The video, we could, let's see if on the next video we could add a bit of animation to here. So this kind of look like, it's very simple. Animating is one of the neat features in Flutter. So anyways, so enough to talk. Thank you for tuning in. See you on the next one. Oh yeah, and if you feel free, if you feel like it, feel free to subscribe and, click the thumbs up button. If you feel like it, of course. All right, thank you very much and see you soon.